All right. I think I also need to share my screen so you guys can see these slides. So let me get that out of the way too. Are you guys able to see the slides right now?
Yes.
Okay, let me put them on slideshow mode so you guys can see them a little bit bigger. Now, is that better?
Yeah.
All right. All right. So me and Tony kind of been going back and forth on this already a little bit. So we'll go ahead and make this a formal discussion. So I should have members of my vision and values course and members of my strategic marketing course. This is a combined Zoom room this morning because I want to talk about a topic that's centric to both courses, and that's transformational leadership. And before I get into this, I was kind of sharing with Tony how this presentation came into play. In April of 2017, my boss sent me to an executive training course at Harvard. And while I was there, I had a chance to interact with a lot of really sharp, smart individuals from across the federal government and some of the top academic, professors at Harvard also. And so one morning we were there and there was a topic discussion about transformational leadership and whether or not it was practical. And so the chair of the program, she kind of stood up and she said, well, I don't think that transformational leadership is practical in the workplace. And she was handing out these articles and I just didn't think it was a very fair assessment of this leadership behavior. So, and plus I got my doctorate in transformational leadership. So naturally I took that a little bit personal. So my facial expression kind of gave it away, and she asked if I had an issue with her statement, and I said, well, yes, I do. And so she gave me an opportunity to kind of defend my position in front of 80 of my colleagues and about 30 or 40 Harvard professors, and it was pretty well received. I'm not sure if you guys all got a chance to see the entire video, but at the very end of that video, we got a standing ovation and got a chance to kind of answer some questions. But in that this presentation, I actually had a chance to kind of demonstrate how transformational leadership is applied practically in the workplace, and how I've kind of used it to assess organizational culture, organizational effectiveness, and how I kind of put transformational leadership items in place to kind of improve the culture of an organization. So. With that being said, I'll go ahead and I'll get into it. And you guys, as I go through this presentation, or as you've kind of had thoughts from the video, make sure you guys write those down because I want to try to address those for you as best I can throughout this video. So the slide that you see now, it just kind of gives, a good description of transformational leadership. And I'm not going to drain this slide by reading the definitions to you, but one thing I do want to point out to you is those outputs of transformational leadership that you kind of see at the bottom. You have vision, because as a transformational leader, you have to have the vision to kind of speak to the end state of where you want to get your folks to go to. Now, when it comes to transformational leadership, the end state is not always the status quo. I'm looking at an end state of what can be, a new end state, that you're leading your folks to get to. You see the connector there with motivation and inspiration. That connector is there because a lot of times we as professionals or we as leaders, we have a tendency to use those two terms interchangeably. So the way I kind of tell people about this is, I look at inspiration as the seed, and I look at motivation as the water. You can have all the inspiration. all the you can plant all the seeds that you want, but you have to have water to make it grow. So for me, that inspiration is like what is that fire, or what's that passion inside you that causes you to kind of move towards a direction that you want to go to. Whereas motivation are those external factors that kind of prompt you to go towards your true north, or whatever your passion is for that desired end state. Change leadership. You've heard the term change agents. or change management. Well, with transformational leadership, I think you have to kind of coin that term change leadership, because we're not just managing requirements, new requirements that are pushed down to us, but we're actually identifying those new areas that require change. So, I don't look at you all, well, hopefully if I'm teaching you right, I won't look at you all as being change agents, but I'll look at you all as being change leaders. Systems thinking. Systems thinking, is a way of kind of looking at a process or looking at a system of processes and seeing how they all connect or how they all intersect. Well, when I'm talking to like customers, and when I'm talking to members of my workforce, when I'm listening to some of those issues, I like to put myself in a circumstance and think about how those issues impact the entire operation, or how those issues impact an entire process or entire system. So it's just a way of just kind of connecting the dots to see how whatever issues or whatever new areas of change that's needed, what are the second and third order effects, of implementing that change. And lastly, leadership development. And I'll talk about that, as I kind of put together my research, my dissertation research, as a part of my project, I kind of created a transformational leadership certification. And I'll talk about that, as I move through this presentation. I think the last thing I need to point out to you is the yellow call-out box that you see on the screen there, because to me, those are three things that kind of differentiate transformational leadership from other leadership behaviors. You have charisma, which is basically just a leader's way of connecting, to others, to customers or to the workforce. You have interpersonal skills, and that's just, understanding relationships, how others have relationships with others. This is a way of kind of reading those relationships and understanding those relationships. And empathy, and that's just knowing how to put yourself in a circumstance to see how issues affect others. So to me, those are things that kind of differentiate this leadership style with other leadership styles. And quite frankly, this is also a differentiator between leadership and management. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, throughout this presentation also. I just want to make sure I didn't miss any key points. Okay, so let's move on. And I'm giving you guys the condensed version from what you've seen in the video at Harvard. So if any thoughts or any thought-provoking comments or questions come to you, make sure you guys jot those down so I can kind of address those for you, at the end of the presentation. What you see on the screen now, I would probably call this a visual depiction of my dissertation research. This was my first cut at developing a transformational leadership framework. And one of my thoughts behind doing this is that if I'm going to mentor leaders and professionals, whether it's in the business sector, government sector, nonprofit, I want to have a guide that kind of gives me left and right limits to kind of mentor and kind of help develop. So, and I'll just run you through this really, really quick. So on the outside, you kind of heard me talk about Lean Six Sigma. Lean Six Sigma is a framework for improving processes. So my premise behind this is that with any type of transformation initiative, you need to learn how to assess processes, assess situations, and kind of put an acceptable justification in place to how others would kind of accept that change, because we all know that change is not easily accepted. But if you can kind of use data to kind of justify why you need change, or kind of use any type of information to kind of justify the change, then you have a better opportunity to have that change effort to be received. So with Lean Six Sigma, you have a belted framework. It ranges from the novice level up to the expert level. You have a white belt, yellow belt, green belt, black belt, and then master black belt. And then the way it works is, once you kind of go through the Six Sigma training, you can go into an organization and look at any process, whether you know about it or not, and you can kind of map out the components of that process. And based off of what you learn with Six Sigma, it teaches you how to recommend controls or recommend improvement efforts to kind of make a process go faster. They call it Six Sigma because Six Sigma means that you can take a process and if you repeat it a million times, you won't have any defects. That's what they call a Six Sigma level of process operation or process optimization. The problem with Lean Six Sigma, though, is sometimes it can be a bit rigid. It focuses more on the task part of it instead of the people part of it. So with being transformational or transformational leadership, you want to put the people component back into this. So what I did was I overlaid the components of Six Sigma with appreciative inquiry. And in doing so, in summary, I'm just teaching you how to look at a glass as being half full instead of half empty. So from a practical perspective, instead of me going to Shanti's organization and saying, hey, Shanti, this process is not working well, we need to launch a Six Sigma effort, I would go into Shanti's organization and say, hey, Shanti, this process is working very well, but if we implement these controls, it can operate a lot better. So that just kind of softens the rigid framework of Six Sigma when you overlay those components of appreciative inquiry. And you see there you have affirmative competence, which is just the capacity to let an organization see what it's done well in the past. Generative competence, which is just the experience or showing an organization how the contributions will impact the organization as a whole. Now, that kind of gets me to thinking about that non-Machiavellian intent that I kind of talked about earlier. So, when you want to look at a contribution to make sure it's for the greater good, you don't want to have any personal agendas. You don't want to have any personal motives. We call that a non-Machiavellian intent. And it also kind of gets into servant leadership because, when we're kind of looking at these opportunities to inject change, we want to make sure it's for the good of others, not for the good of ourselves. Collaborative competence is just the ability to kind of work well with others, and expansive competence, which is this that out of the box thinking. You have to get in the habit of not looking at the status quo or always saying no when you want to change something. You have to be able to say, why not? So that expansive competence teaches you how to ask that question, why not, and get you thinking outside of the box. And then, of course, you have those leadership traits, which are parts of BGU's transformational leadership perspectives, global leadership. I think we can all agree that with the way that the business landscape is changing today, you have to be able to kind of look at things from a global perspective with the way we use technology, social media. We can interact with folks from all over the globe. So we have to be able to understand different backgrounds, different diversity, and just be more inclusive. That's just a good part of global leadership. Servant leadership, I kind of touched on it earlier. Mother Teresa is probably one of my heroes because I think she is just the perfect example of servant leadership. And then lastly, contextual leadership. It's just learning how to look at a situation and kind of put it in context. So every opportunity to transform an organization is not going to be at the same scale. In some cases, it might be a much smaller effort. In some cases, it might be a larger effort. But what you have to be able to do is you need to be able to benchmark, look at some of these examples of how transformation has worked well for an organization, take components of that success and see how you can apply it to the circumstance that you have at hand. So, and then I would be remiss if I didn't talk about that moral compass that you see at the very top. That moral compass is important because it kind of gets you into that discussion of whether or not leaders are born or are leaders made. And if you ask Dr. Barber, I'm going to tell you it's a little bit of both. Because in some cases, you're raised with those family values. You're taught how to choose that hard right over the easy wrong, even when nobody's looking. And then you can kind of take what you learned and you can kind of go to leadership training and you just kind of refine those values and those morals that you learned at home. Where in some cases, an individual may not have been taught those same kind of morals at home, but they can still kind of learn it along the way, in leadership development training. So I don't think you can argue one way or the other or that leaders are born or leaders are made. In my opinion, it's a combination of the two. So that's what I mean by that moral compass and those values. All right, some benefits of transformational leadership. I think some of these are kind of self-explanatory. You have the ability to identify change. operationally and strategically. So in some cases, you may not be operating at the strategic level just by nature of your job. You might have to manage like day-to-day operations, day-to-day processes, but at the same time, some of those day-to-day processes, they need to be changed too. So whether you're injecting Six Sigma or where you're injecting, a more software approach for injecting change, at various levels, you have to be able to kind of identify opportunities for change. Increased workforce morale. So as leaders, if we are just so task-oriented, and we're not asking our employees or our customers, how are you doing today? They will not respond to you very, very, very well. I mean, you have to take time out, ask folks how they're doing, learn how to read your employees' non-verbs. I can tell you now, when some of my folks walk in the door, I can tell you just by the way that they walk in or by the facial expression if they're having a good day or not. So if I'm reading it right and I see that they're not having a good day, I'm going to go and ask them what's going on or how's your day going, just so I can kind of connect with them. But I will tell you, if you can learn how to connect with your workforce a little bit more, not only does morale go up, but productivity goes up too in organization and ultimately organizational performance. Emotional intelligence, I just kind of touched on that, just learning how to read, those non-verbs and body language. This next bullet, framework to maximize individual and team capabilities. So there's a framework out there called the strategic triangle. And what the strategic triangle does, it teaches you how to think strategically. So you have an organization's goals or objectives at the very top, and then you have external support on one side, and then you have capabilities and skills of your organization on the left. And so in order to meet a lot of those goals, you have to know what your employees can do and what they can't do. And so your job as transformational leaders, or as leaders, period, is you have to learn how to get the maximum output out of your employee skills, what they have. So that is very important, but it all ties together. Learning the capacity and the skills of your employees, and learn how to get the most out of them. But if you're really demonstrating emotional intelligence and demonstrating how to connect with your workforce, they won't have any problem having those discussions with you and telling you, hey, what they can, what they can't do, areas where they think they need training to improve the skills. It's all connected. That's all a part of organizational culture. It's all connected. Developing self-sustaining capabilities. So when we work with individuals or when we work with organizations, when we're teaching them how to improve things or how to solve challenges, you don't want to get in the habit of always doing it for them. You want to give them the capabilities to kind of help themselves, help them develop self-sustaining individual capabilities. And when you do that, you're also developing them as leaders along the way also. So, if you ever read a book called Toxic Charity, I strongly encourage you to kind of go out and read that book, because it talks about how sometimes when you give to charities, some of them kind of, it becomes toxic because they depend on it too much. Well, I kind of relate that to fixing the problems for organizations all the time. Teach them how to help themselves. Teach them how to fix some of those challenges themselves. Blending of leadership and management. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm gonna set my binder down so I can talk from the heart on this one. There is a difference between leadership and management. I mean, in a lot of cases, and you may not think about this, but there is, in a lot of cases, professionals, they use these terms interchangeably. I mean, I can remember sitting in an award ceremony, and I heard a leader give a project manager, he gave him an award. The exact words were, "I'm giving John Doe an award for outstanding leadership as a project manager." To me, that is an oxymoron. It doesn't even match. I mean, because as a manager, you're managing a structure that was already pushed down to you. So you may not be actually generating any kind of intellectual thought. To me, I see like as a rigid manager as somebody that's just kind of managing a rigid structure that is already in place, but you're really focused on like the task instead of kind of looking at the people part of it. Whereas the leadership teaches you how to look at not only just the task part of it, but it also teaches you how to look at the people component of it. see how your people are doing, seeing how you need to make a change where it's needed. But I will tell you, for an organization to be successful, you need both of those components. You just can't say organizations can be successful with just leadership. No, you got to have management also. You got to have efficient management of those day-to-day policies, efficient management of those day-to-day processes. So kind of look at it as like riding a bike, like I kind of mentioned in that video. In some cases, you're going to put more emphasis on leadership and then management. And in some cases, you need to put more emphasis on management. But if you put the right blend in place, it's just like riding a bike. You just keep that momentum going forward, and you keep an organization getting better. So now don't get me wrong. You are going to have some instances where you do have to kind of be rigid and kind of manage, things to task. So for an example, a crisis scenario, let's just say the building's on fire. Well, you're not going to have time to always just say, hey, how are you doing? You need to get these folks out of the building. Hey, be more direct. Get to this location within this amount of time, or it might not be with us anymore. So depending on the situation, you have to put more of a focus on leadership and management. Lastly, improvement of organizational culture, and I'm not going to touch on that on this slide. I'll talk about that on the next slide. So you kind of heard me talk about how I got frustrated with the leader at Harvard, because she kind of indicated that you could not apply transformational leadership in a practical perspective. Well, this is how I apply transformational leadership in a practical perspective. So not only am I the executive officer for my human resources director, but I'm also what they call the culture champion. So I'm actually charged with ensuring that organizational effectiveness and employee engagement is maximized for my organization. And it's important because as the executive officer, I make sure that we service over 25,000 employees across the globe to make sure they're getting efficient human resources support, at all times. So one of the things I did was I went out and we looked at a research-based approach for measuring culture. And we kind of measure it in 4 main categories. I measure it in adaptability, mission, consistency, and involvement. So those core areas have sub areas also. So adaptability, the ability to kind of create change, customer focus, because as we all know, customer demands change from time to time. It doesn't always stay the same. And organizational learning. You have to be able, that's when I kind of talked about that contextual leadership or for as it relates to appreciative inquiry. You have to be able to look at those past successes and see how they apply to what you're doing today. Mission, you have strategic direction, goals and objectives, vision. So I talked about vision being one of those differentiators for transformational leadership. So you guys can kind of see how this kind of has touch points with transformational leadership. Involvement, some of those sub areas are empowerment, team orientation, capability development, and then lastly, consistency, which has core values. I talked about the moral compass and those values. That's how it has touch points here. Agreement, coordination, and integration. So we don't necessarily call those sub areas and those main areas the same thing as we call them at Bakke. Those transformational leadership principles at Bakke, we have, and Professor McKenzie, you might have to jump in here because I'm drawing a blank. But, we have global leadership. I'm drawing a blank right now. But
I'll give them to you as they are in the syllabi. You have contextual. You do have. Let me give them straight because I'm interpreting them rather than giving them to you.
Just read them straight.
So let me give them to you just as they are. I'll give you in a minute or less coming up with it.
Yeah, but while she's pulling them up, the key point I want to make here is that depending on the sector, those transformational leadership perspectives are called something a little bit different. but you have to see, you have to learn how to kind of apply them in context to what you're measuring or what you're applying. And we'll come back to those, Professor McKenzie. We don't have to go into them right now, but that was the key point I wanted to make with the team. So as you can see, this culture model, you see these culture wheels. These are actually culture results from 2014 and 2016. And so just to give you a little bit more context, I measure my organization's effectiveness every 18 months. So actually this March, I'll be measuring this again. So hopefully my color wheel gets a little bit better. But from 2014 to 2016, you can see my results got a little bit better because I have more color in the wheel. The more color, the higher your culture is, the higher your organizational performance, and the better your employee engagement is. But the areas that I have gaps, I kind of infuse some of those transformational leadership perspectives to kind of make sure I'm capturing some of those. So what you see here is just kind of like a graphical display of how I analyze those results by the numbers. So in 2014, adaptability, I kind of improved because of some of the action items that I put in place. Mission, it got better also because of some of the action items I put in place. Consistency got better from 2014 to 2016 with the exception of coordination and integration. And then that's an area where I have to kind of teach my staff directors to kind of work together instead of working in silos, but it's getting better. And involvement, that area got better also. So just to kind of give you an idea of how I kind of put action planning in place to kind of generate these positive results, I gather up all of my sub-organizational culture champions and I hold workshops. I conduct comparative analysis of the data that I see in those surveys from year to year. We develop concrete action items that I ensure that is approved by my leadership. And then I make sure that I track those action items to make sure that each one of my staff directors are putting those items into place, because I want to make sure that my employees understand that their voices are heard and that culture is a priority, and we're actually improving culture in my organization. And I won't go through all of these, but these are just examples of some of the action items that I put in place. So for example, what is this one? This is coordination and integration. So basically what I did was I took my staff directors and we held what we call a stakeholder analysis that we call a give-get session. And so they all have issues with working together because they're real competitive. They don't like to talk to each other. So what I did was I put them all in a room and I had a matrix on the board and I said, okay, for my policy folks, these are the items that I know that are important to you. These are the items that I know impact others that are sitting on your left and your right. So if you guys are not talking, then these are the processes that they impact. And so I went through that for each one of my staff directors and a light just went on. And so what I found is that now they're all talking more, they're all working together more, and then just the way that they're kind of coordinating and integrating with actions, it's all coming together. And I kind of helped to influence some of that too. So I kind of developed like an information management portal. And basically what that does is it just kind of centralizes the way information is managed. So instead of me emailing information back and forth, they kind of post it into like a centralized location. So that way everybody can kind of see it and everybody can kind of see what they owe the other person. I did a lean review of all of my processes. This is where I kind of incorporated Six Sigma, to kind of help improve some of those things. And then I also looked at something what I call a cross-functional process management framework. So every process that I have in my human resources directorate, I took it and I kind of staggered them all in parallel, and I put all those sections that my staff directors are responsible for on the left-hand side. And what I did was I went through and I made them look at all the points of intersect. And in doing that, they could kind of see the need for why they needed to communicate more and work together more, because they quickly realized that a lot of the processes that they manage has touch points with one another. So now instead of them working in silos, they're kind of working together, for the greater good of the organization. So, and I won't go through all of these, but I just wanted you to kind of see how I kind of use remnants of transformational leadership to kind of measure culture, and also put action items in place to kind of make sure that culture is continuously improved, every 18 months. And the last thing I want to kind of leave you with is just some of these transformational leadership quotes. Edward Deming, a bad system will beat a good person every time. So you guys can kind of deduce what he meant from that. If you want something new, you have to stop doing something old. That is a very, very strong quote from Peter Drucker. And the last one I want to point out to you is John D. Rockefeller. Good leadership consists of showing average people how to do the work of superior people. I love that quote because to me what that means is you have to continuously develop those that are underneath you to make sure they can transform into those leaders that we want them to be. So, all right, folks, I know I rambled quite a bit, so I want to stop and take a breath and give you guys a chance to ask any questions that you guys may want to ask, so I can try to address some of those.
Thanks, Dr. Bob.
Okay.
Thanks, Dr. Baba. This is Erisa. I just wanted to, if you can explain a little more about the way you come with the numbers, especially on vision. One of the areas was vision, and if you can explain how you come up with those numbers to measure your progress, how you perform in the area.
Well, those numbers is that actually comes. It's a research-based approach, and that's actually a culture model developed by a company called Denison. So those measurement indicators, I didn't necessarily come up with the measurements. That's a framework that they actually developed, but it's predicated on the number of respondents and the type of questions that are asked. So if a particular question regarding vision, based on the number of respondents, if it hits like a 75% or more, that means you have a pretty positive culture in regarding the vision. But if it's below 75%, or even if it's a score that's lower than what I got in a previous culture model, then I want to look at how I can look at trends related to vision and put action items in place to make sure that vision gets better. So when it comes to vision, you just want to make sure that your employees understand the mission statement of the organization, and if they can understand where leaders want to take the organization. That's all related to vision. So if I got scores that are pretty low in the vision area, then that tells me that folks don't understand my mission statement, or they don't understand what the long-term way ahead is where we want to take our organization. So that's kind of how I kind of got tackled the vision part.
I would appreciate if you could share those questions. We do have a tool that we use with Hope International called Mission True.
Yeah, I had to get permission for that though, to be honest with you, because this is a lot of their content is, we have to sign like non-disclosure agreements with as a part of the government. But if I can get permission to share that with you, then I'll share it with you.
All right, thanks.
Tisha, did you have a question? I think you were trying to chime in.
All right. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
I wrote a comment already. So I was saying that it was an excellent presentation and information sharing. And of course, I'm so blessed to be learning from you. I'm not always in a place of leadership. For example, where I teach, I am a subordinate. So I would like to know, how do you change culture when you are a subordinate? For example, when you see that the leader isn't, and it's not like you're criticizing the leader, but because of what you know, because of what you're studying, and you don't want to come across again as puffed up with knowledge and information, but how do you change toxic work culture when you're a subordinate?
Oh, that's an excellent question. And that's another reason why I wanted to incorporate appreciative inquiry with the framework that I use for developing transformational leaders, because appreciative inquiry teaches you how to kind of give that type of constructive feedback in more of a positive manner to make sure that it's more received. So, and it's an art, Tisha. I'm gonna tell you, it's not something that you can learn overnight. But appreciative inquiry teaches you how to teach others to look at their glass as being half full instead of half empty. So And instead of me going in and say, hey, you know, your leadership is jacked up, I'm gonna look at some of those areas that person may have been successful from a leadership perspective, and then just said, okay, well, but also there's a couple of areas I think would kind of round out that leadership a little bit better if you incorporated X, Y, and Z. But if you want to talk offline, if you can give me some examples of what you want to try to address, maybe I can help you come up with an approach to kind of present to them to kind of help make sure that's received the right way.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Teacher, on that point, I wanted to just address mindset as well. You said I'm not in a leadership position, I'm in a subordinate, I teach. But I just wanted to remind you that you're also in a leadership position because you teach.
Right, I understand that.
And oftentimes, there is a way in which we're also culture changers because you are experiencing something you want to change and you are empowered to make the change on minds that are very receptive at the same time, right?
Okay.
So you might just want to look at the focus too in terms of where you're being called to make the change at any particular point in time. Just that bit.
Right. Well, I understand. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Barbara, I have a comment and a question.
Mm-hmm.
We're sometimes taught that why change something that works? That statement basically means that if it's worked, don't fix it. But based on the presentation, we're looking for opportunity for change. We're looking to improve what is existing and even go outside of that to create new systems and operation that will bring us greater efficiency. But the question I have is, using the model or using the information that you have, we can tell that this took vast amount of time to construct, vast amount of time and resources and thinking to develop. How would you advise organizations like the church or organizations like small businesses that don't have that kind of resources to invest in the finding? Because this presentation you're giving us is based on first finding out what is there and how you can improve on that. But I believe the question being asked is, how can we go about, there's a lot of information has to be gathered, a lot of resources, time and energy and expertise, which might not be available. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, so that's where I kind of went back and when I mentioned about contextual leadership. So you have to be able to take, from a benchmarking perspective, look at how success worked at an organization, but then at the same time, you need to be able to compartmentalize and take those components to see how it relates to what you're working with, you know, in the circumstances you're faced with. So, you know, it's not going to always be a cookie cutter approach or one size fits all. You have to be able to you have to be able to analyze and take the components that work for your situation. So, for example, if I had to put 20 items in place for a government organization, that may not necessarily be the case for what you're doing like in your church. You may only need to address one particular area or put maybe 2 or 3 of those items in place. So you don't have to always use the entire model for each organization. You just have to use your own judgment and contextualize to see how it best fits the situation that you're facing. And I know that's not always easy to do, and it may not be the exact answer that you wanted to hear, but it's a flexible framework, and you have to be able to kind of adapt it. And once you gain experience with doing it, Tony, you'll understand it a little bit more. But that's not something that you can try to learn to do early on. Latch on to a mentor who has experience doing it, and let that mentor show you the way how to do that. I mean,
in one of my reading, Doc, I read Tim Keller's projection or his understanding, what he called the gospel ecosystem. It's sort of like an appreciative inquiry of understanding an ecosystem in context of how it operates. I'm trying to see how this fits with the model you're presenting to us of trying to understand transformation within an organization. But what is coming back to me is the level and the expertise needed to bring this kind of information to bear on small businesses or an organization that don't have that kind of capacity. I mean, I'm not sure how transferable it is to this kind of environment.
So again, Tony, this exact model is not going to work for everybody. So what you want to look at is, in general terms, look for a tool to assess the organization. Look at the items that you want to assess, and then look to see how you want to address those gaps. So it might necessarily mean that you need to go out and find a different type of model to do that. This model is not going to work for everybody. This model worked for me because of the components that I wanted to assess and the complexity of it. But if it's just a more simplified model that you're looking for, this particular model may not work for you. But in general terms, an assessment tool, items that you want to be assessed, and then mitigation strategies. That's what you want to be able to do. There's tons of models out there, and trust me, I looked through bunches of them, and I had to go back to the drawing board several times. But you just have to look to see which model is going to work best for you, because this model is not this is not a one size fit model. It's one size fits all model. This model is really complex, and maybe I should have presented it to you, but I just wanted you to see how I used to kind of use transformational leadership to impact the workplace.
I mean, the time and space doesn't allow us to really get a full grasp of the model, which is a disadvantage to us because, I mean, from where you're sitting, you understand its complexity and its aggregate value. But, I mean, with rapid fire presentation, I mean, you did a great job, but there's still lots of gaps that we still have to understand.
Yeah, but the good thing about this is, Dr. Barber's not going anywhere, and you can always reach out to me one-on-one for a time outside of this session. So, and you shouldn't try to absorb all of this in this session anyway, because it's a lot to absorb. So, use me as a resource, and don't be afraid to call me for a one-on-one outside of this session. So, that's what I'm here for. Exactly what I'm here for.
Dr. Barber, can you maybe give us some links that we can go to look at some of those different models, some that you would endorse or approve of people using, like in different contextual work environments, such as, I know there's, like, if I'm offering a service, that would be probably a different model from a company that's selling a product, and maybe you can give us some recommendations on some models to look at that's been used before and have been successful.
Yes, ma'am. I can absolutely do that. And while I'm thinking about it, Wendy, I wanted you to know I did do that survey for you, and I hit submit yesterday. So you should.
Oh yeah, thank you for doing that for me.
Yeah, but I will also put together a list of different assessment models and shoot that out to the group. So. And Tony, I think that'll help you get at some of the questions you were asking too. And I'll see if I can bucket it on by sector, level of complexity, so that way you guys can kind of, track it a little bit easier.
Thank you.
But you gotta give me some time to put that together, because it's gonna take me some time to do. All right, any other questions?
Dr. Barber, I don't want to dominate the board in discussion, but how did you come up with I'm looking at the model you have and the components that you're looking at: adaptability, mission, involvement, and consistency. How do you arrive at these four main components, these four main areas, and then you broke them down? How do you arrive at that?
Well, so my organization is just a small component of the overarching Department of Defense agency that I represent. So what I did was I looked at the strategic goals that the Department of Defense has, and based off of those strategic goals, that's how I knew to kind of cascade down to what I needed my organization to look at. So it all connects to strategic goals of the Department of Defense, what the Secretary of Defense pushes down to me, and then I looked at those core cascading elements. So that way, when the Secretary of Defense or when Mr. Trump comes to me and says, "Hey, Dr. Barber, how come you're looking at X, Y, and Z?" And I'm going to say, well, because you guys put this in the National Defense Strategy and the Strategic Goals document. So that's why I'm looking at what I'm looking at. So. And they have asked me before why I'm looking at the areas that I'm looking for. So, and that's always the answer that I tell them.
Dr. Barber.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say hi to Andrew and Erisa, my old classmates.
Hi,
Hey,
Shanti. Yes, Erisa. Nice to see you all again.
You too.
I think transformational start with the leader themselves. It started inside, where you change, and then you can actually see how you can bring about a change that you would like to see in organization. And unless we change, I don't think we can be able to see that and help others change. So transformation for me, I think, starts with the internal. Though you might not be the leader of an organization, it's like for me, I see so many things in our country that needs changing, but I am not in government and to bring that change. And I think though, even if we start with something little, in some little way that we can show a change, maybe in just a simple group, or just by something little that we're doing that can affect someone else, and eventually it has a ripple effect that can maybe even become a nationwide effect. And so transformation can start like that in an organization where you might just you doing to show the leader what is it that you're trying to bring about change in, and grasping that, then they might, yes, we want to implement what you're doing.
That's an excellent example of how to compartmentalize and look at this from a contextual perspective. And one of the things I mentioned in that Harvard link is that to me, transformational leadership is almost like a reversible T-shirt. You can use it to assess an organization, but you can also use it to assess yourself. To kind of look at ways that you want to improve yourself. And like I kind of mentioned earlier, you don't have to always look at it as a big strategic change. If you can look at some of those areas we can get quick wins, or areas that like the more tactical or operational level, look to kind of influence change there too. And across all sectors, not just government, nonprofit, in the schoolhouse, churches. You just have to kind of look to see how you can take components of it and see how to apply it. So that was a great comment, Shanti.
Can I also say something about that? I just want to say that if you look at where you're at and where God has placed you, try to be a transformational leader where you're at and cause change where you're at. And then others will see that change. And then God will move you up naturally to the next level. And that's what I'm experiencing as a transformational leader. So instead of looking, oh, well, I want to fix that way over there, start where you're at and fix things where you are, and then just keep going. And then I believe God will lead you to the path where he wants you to be, and to make bigger changes along the way. It's like a journey.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly.
Wendy, I want to drill further down on that, because as I was making notes, a few notes on what Dr. Barber was saying, I was trying to make the application to me. Very personal, all the way down there. And in terms of even beginning by doing appreciative inquiry on yourself. What are the strengths I have? The whole SWOT analysis of me. And that understanding taking me one step further into having been armed with an awareness of what I have to move with. Then I can, affirm others and be more affirmative within the ambit of those in my sphere, and collaborate and bring those competence to bear. Because when we emphasize our strength, when we are aware of it, and when we actually compliment others on their strength, we mentally move them to a place of readiness to increase that strength. So, Shanti, we begin to see not so much so what is wrong with us, but more so what is good about what we already have so that we feel good enough about ourselves to want to be better. And then comes in all these tools that we're talking about. For example, this whole tool of job fit that leads to the empowerment, to all the things that, help us. I know, begin to be comfortable that this is what I'm good at doing, but this is what I'm not good at doing. And so we begin to share, to recognize your strengths, bring the collaboration in, and we begin to create a mindset to work together going forward. I really think I need to begin with me on this journey.
Yes, Yvonne, thank you. Actually, as you're talking, I remember in my last class we talked about asset mapping, and I introduced it into my youth group, and I asked them all, please list all the things you're good at, so that you could start with that, and how you can impact people with the things you're good at, and don't look at what you not good at. And
so you're becoming culture champion, Shanti. You are already, you just need to begin to utilize the terminology, right? But you're beginning, I like Dr. Barbara speaking about the whole thing of manager and leader. The task manager as against the inspirational team lead was how I translated it to me. Because I was really trying to apply, right? For the last 15 days, I have been task manager, but trying to get this awesome hard job done through inspiration, trying to we say in Jamaica, we sweet mouth people, right? But really making people feel that they are so worthwhile and valuing their help so much. Because the physical task I couldn't do, right? So I made everybody feel like, I don't do this without you. I am not just task manager. I must be inspirational leader as well.
Yeah, and don't get, and I hope I didn't give that the wrong connotation, because in some cases you have to be task focused. Sometimes you just can't get around it. But one of the points I wanted to kind of articulate too, that Shanti just kind of, it was pretty thought provoking, but one of the ways that you have to influence change or help influence change is, the first thing you have to do is find your true north, or find what you're passionate about, And I think along that same vein, finding those skills that you're good at, and then focus on those skills to see how you can use those to influence change. But that's one of the things I always say: find your true north, find your passion, what inspires you, and then when you can truly find what your true north is, and then along that same vein, those skills that you're good at, it makes being able to influence change or being transformational a lot easier. Good points.
I really appreciate just the idea of blending leadership and management, and like you were just talking about with that idea of the leader versus that just task manager. But one of the things I see a lot in organizations that I go into is that they might be highly strategic and good at the management aspect at a certain level, and where what they lack in is often that leadership side. But more than just going hand in hand, I really think that leadership side allows them to actually much more effectively do the management side. That when you know people in a much deeper way, and that they also know you and they trust you, you're actually able to impact how you manage, just much more effectively.
Good point. Yeah, because as a good leader, you have to be able to let them manage. So that's a very, very good point, Andrew. Very good point.
I loved the what you did about the connecting the motivation and the inspiration together, because you're right. You really can't you really have to inspire people in order to motivate them. And I think that's the challenge, at least when it comes to being a teacher. That's a challenge to us. I mean, how we need to inspire our students in order to motivate them to learn the curriculum. And that's a pretty hard job. And I believe I don't know. I think that it's a hard job for any manager to do too, because as a restaurant manager, that's also hard to inspire your employees in order to motivate them to, do the work that you expect them to do. So that's a challenge. That's where the challenge is, I believe. At least would be for me.
I got to tell you guys how much I have really just thoroughly enjoyed this session with you guys this morning. Just the engagement, the input, the questions from top to bottom. This has been a great session. So,
Do you have a minute?
I have one.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted. I like what you said about transformational leadership as being working with subordinates to identify need and to create vision. From that, I get the impression that to be a transformational leader, you need to create other transformational leaders.
Yes.
And work with them towards identifying change and vision together. And so my question there is then transformational leadership is more of creating transformational leaders than creating change, than creating transformation itself. Am I making sense?
Absolutely. I mean, not only is transformational leadership a capability multiplier, but it's also a leadership development framework. So you are exactly right. We have a responsibility to develop those behind us, so we can keep, this particular leadership behavior going. And I think if we don't look to mentor and develop those behind us, then I think we're shirking our responsibilities. I mean, that's why I get so excited about, and just like Professor McKenzie just said, the key word is sustainability. But that's why I get so excited about these Zoom sessions, because I don't just look at this as just an academic framework or academic requirement, but to me, this is teaching, this is mentoring, this is coaching. And long after you guys leave Dr. Barber's MBA program or Dr. Barber's MBA courses, you will always be able to latch on to me and reach out to me for mentoring and coaching and that kind of stuff outside of the coursework, because this is more than just academics. This is a matter of fusing practicality with academia. You guys are becoming scholar practitioners, but if I didn't want to continue to mentor and coach, then I think I would be neglecting my responsibility. So it goes hand in hand.
I'm sorry. One more thing. Do you know any resources or books or anything that you would recommend to us that would actually give you advise someone on how to use that, how to inspire people in order to get them to motivate them? Like, is there anything out there we can read, like extra resources that we can go to connect that together? Or is that something that you just kind of made up?
No, I mean, I can definitely send you some scholarly articles, but just know you can inspire others, but they have to be motivated themselves to move towards that inspiration. So there's a difference between the two.
I know it's kind of hard to. That's kind of hard to do. I was just wondering, because that's kind of what I'm attracted to, is learning how to motivate and inspire right now other people, especially youth, which is who I'm working with right now. So I was just wondering if there's, if you know of any sources that kind of that.
As a matter of fact, Wendy, Tisha just sent you a really good one in your chat thread.
Yeah.
But again, remember, you can inspire. You're just the seed to keep them going. They have to be motivated themselves to move towards that inspiration. So
Yeah.
As long as you can inspire.
It's just that if that motivation is not there, what do you do? It's like,
I just wanted to insert this because there is a psychological approach where we understand that the person's readiness to receive has got to be there. So you could tell me something 100 times until I'm ready to hear it. It's bouncing off. And you've made biblical references, and I think that is why we have this one that Paul is planting and Apollos is watering, but the increase really comes from God. I think to a certain extent it blends there. Importantly too, if I speak of myself, things have been said to me over and over again, but I hear it at a particular point in my life, and you might find that too. So we have to measure the enthusiasm to want to open the brain and put it in and get the response with the fact that the person's readiness, right, is going to kick off at varying points of their lives, right? Just so as not to frustrate you when you have applied all the techniques you've read about and it still didn't happen, you know? And I know that Joy wanted to say something. Joy, we want to give you an opportunity. You've been quiet.
The two things, Dr. McKenzie, when you talked about being faithful and being a changer in your current place, that really resonated with me because, you know, when I started the MBA program, first class I took was with Dr. Barber, and it was values and visions. And I told them, I don't know if you remember, but I said, oh, but I'm not a leader, you know, but because of the situation that I was put in and I was faithful, like I did become a changer. And I was able to initiate change. So what you said, Dr. McKenzie, really resonated with me. You know, going back a year, I think a little over a year, I remember the first class that I had with Dr. Barber, and I said, "Oh, this is the same thing Dr. McKenzie is saying, you know, in a more contextual way." But it's such a blessing to kind of look back and be able to say, yes, from where I was before, now I can see that I can make the change and I can influence others through what I do in small things. And somehow God opens the doors to bigger things where you can influence more people. So I really appreciate that, Dr. McKenzie. And I have a question for you, Dr. Barber. So there, as a transformer leader, a lot of people don't have the charisma, you know, as some people are more passive, but they're still a leader, transformational leader. How do you train yourself, if that's possible, to be more charismatic?
You just got to get out your comfort zone. I mean, some of us are introverts, some of us aren't, but you just have to get out. You have to interact with folks more. You just have to really get yourself out of your comfort zone. Sometimes it might mean volunteering for like more public speaking opportunities just to get you more comfortable with being around a group of people. But that's just something, Joy, that you just have to force it upon yourself to get out of your comfort zone and just learn how to interact with folks. It's not easy. I'm not even gonna lie to you, but it's if you can teach yourself to get out of your comfort zone and do it, it will pay huge dividends. Because where I work, I have a lot of strong personalities. But because I've learned to kind of get out of my comfort zone and learn how to kind of, you know, deal with that kind of stuff, very rarely do I get stressed in the workplace anymore. I just, praise be to God that because of what I've kind of forced myself to kind of go through, it really pays dividends. So really, if you don't take anything out of this course, out of this session this morning, get out your comfort zone and get out there and interact with them.
Joy, apart from correcting Dr. McKenzie, right? And Tisha is responsible, and Dr. Barber, they're responsible for that. But hopefully I won't be correcting you in another couple of months. But the other thing that I want you to link with charisma is just being yourself, knowing that people understand that you care and love for them. Right? And that's being, Dr. Barber spoke about consistency. And part of that consistency is a consistent care. And care is demonstrated, it's not verbalized as much as how it is demonstrated, right? Because you may not, sorry for the background noise, I'm actually in a restaurant, but you may not be as vivacious as you link charisma to, but people really resonate with the consistency of care that makes them feel valued and makes them know that you are serving and embracing and empowering them, and that you're not reserving anything when it comes to, look at Dr. Barber's willingness to take each of you and work with you individually. I mean, that's just totally amazing, and I'm saying it in his presence because time is not is best option right now. But it shows the care and the dedication that want to replicate what he has to offer and what he has been called to offer to all of us, right? So your personality is gonna be your personality, and you can change it, but be careful that you don't appear false in trying to change it, right? Work at it, work at involvement, work at pulling yourself out, but consistency in care is gonna go a long way in building trust with those that you serve and you lead, and making them know you're there for them. Charisma can come and go, and charisma can be light at the top, but not necessarily deep at the bottom.
You know, I know and I know I got to close this pretty soon, but before I do get ready to close it, I want to share something pretty personal with you guys. And Professor McKenzie can attest that this actually happened, but I was very close to leading Baki just a few months ago. And I won't go into a lot of the details, but we're just competing requirements and all that kind of stuff. But when I get a chance to host these kind of sessions and look at the difference that this is making, I know for a fact now that I'm making the right choice to stay with Baki, because we know we have a lot of work we have not finished. And you guys have my word, Dr. Barber's not going anywhere, but I just wanted to share with you that, the participation, just a sense of engagement that I see with you guys in this session, that keeps me here. And it's not because of the money or anything of that kind of stuff, but just the influence. And then I think the difference that I'm making with you guys, along with Professor McKenzie, that's what keeps me here. And I just wanted to thank you guys for taking time to be here and always being engaged and being professional with these kind of forums. So hopefully we can finish this journey together, and then maybe in a few years ago I'll be joining your Zoom sessions with Baki as you guys are developing others, so we can keep the cycle going. But again, I'm very appreciative, and I thank you guys.
Yeah, I can testify to that. You're definitely making a difference in my life and my this journey that I'm taking. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Julie.
Thanks, Dr. Barber. I appreciate you.
All right, everybody. Professor McKenzie, you got anything in closing before we close this one? This was a powerful session.
I just want to say thank you to Dr. Barber, and
I want to join everybody else in thanking you and thanking you for staying.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere.
What you did tell that your staying has to be in order to stabilize me too, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll share with you, Professor McKenzie, I had a lot of discussions with I'll share with you, Professor McKenzie. I had a chance to talk with my leadership team, at my primary job, and they see how near and dear, you know, working with Baki is. So they're going to help make some arrangements to be a little bit more flexible so I can kind of do some more things with Baki too. So it's all good. All right, folks. Well, with that being said, I guess we can try to end this one on a positive note. If I can figure out how to stop recording. Okay, I see it. But I want you guys to have a great rest of your weekend. And again, if you guys want some one-on-one sessions outside of this, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll always make myself available to you.